This is André at Midnight's Edge, today joined by guests from the land down under, Chris Mullarvey and James Crowhurst from Choc Tops.
G'day Andre, good to be here.
How's it going? Thanks for having us.
Fox has announced not one but two new X-Men spin-off TV series. This was quickly followed by rumors that the Fantastic Four had reverted back to Marvel before being denied by both Fox and Marvel. This might have come on the heels of the showdown and change of power inside Marvel. So, to give the proper context, we will in this video cover Marvel Studios leaving Marvel Entertainment, the demotion of the Marvel Creative Committee, the people involved, and what this might mean for the relation between Marvel and Fox and the proverbial reversal of the Fantastic Four movie rights. The Hollywood Reporter first reported about the restructuring going on under Disney's roof on August 31st. Under the previous organizational structure, you had Disney on top, obviously, with Alan Horn being the main man in charge at this level. Under him, you had Marvel Entertainment, run by Ike Perlmutter, and under Marvel Entertainment was Marvel Studios, run by Kevin Feige. The practical outcome of this was that Kevin Feige had to report and needed the approval of Ike Perlmutter and the Marvel Creative Committee of Marvel Entertainment for anything he wanted, with Perlmutter in turn reporting up to Disney. Clearly, Kevin Feige wasn't happy working under Ike Perlmutter, who is widely regarded as cheap, vindictive, and micromanaging. So tell us what might have happened.
Well, after an age of Ike Perlmutter, everything finally hit the fan a month ago on the set of Captain America: Civil War, where our main players, Feige and Perlmutter, clashed one time too many and ironically started their own civil war, fighting themselves like two B-grade Marvel superheroes, like Speedball and Squirrel Girl. The main issue of the fight seemed to be Feige's need to include Robert Downey Jr., the most expensive actor in the Marvel movie roster, in the film. Perlmutter was not happy to fork up the cash. Though to be fair, Civil War is primarily a story about Captain America and Iron Man. How he expected to write a story about one without the other is beyond me. How can you do without Iron Man? It doesn't matter. I digress. It doesn't matter. Feige ran to Disney CEO Bob Iger for help, and a brand new organizational structure was born from the chaos. Marvel Studios had finally cut the long, gross umbilical cord connecting them to Marvel Entertainment and were able to freely hide beneath Disney's skirts. Feige no longer reports to the openly insane Perlmutter or the Marvel Creative Committee, and instead reports directly to Alan Horn of Disney. Perlmutter and his team still hold the reins on Marvel Television, with Jeff Loeb running things down there.
Rich Johnston at Bleeding Cool also covered the story, but their coverage has a very different slant. They sell Perlmutter as an unsung hero and Kevin Feige as a villain, someone brash who cuts down anyone who opposes him, who gets rid of naysayers and isolates himself on Feige Island, as they put it, where he reigns supreme. They also add that if he had listened to the input from the Marvel Creative Committee, then millions worth of reshoots on Age of Ultron could have been saved, which we'll get back to later. Now, before we analyze these very different narratives and discuss what this might mean going forward, let us look at the key players involved in Marvel's Civil War. First, there is Kevin Feige.
It's not surprising to learn that Kevin Feige was a fan of Marvel Comics even before he got involved in the film business, and through his passion for the characters and creative storytelling, he's given the fans quality films and also made a lot of people very, very rich. Having built the MCU up to become the biggest film franchise of all time, it's not surprising that he is regularly compared to Steve Jobs, John Lennon, and Jesus. What most people are unaware of, however, is that Feige actually got his big break through his involvement with Fox during the development of X-Men 1. Lauren Schuler-Donner, who was the executive producer of the film, made Feige an associate producer based on his knowledge of the Marvel Universe, and I think most people would agree that his subsequent success can be based on the fact that he is just a big fan. The story goes that whenever a film like Elektra, Daredevil, or Hulk were in trouble, Feige would recommend going back to the source material and keeping the creative team linked to the origins of the characters as well as the bigger picture. A.V. Arad of Marvel Entertainment and Toy Biz fame hired Feige based on his work with Fox in the hope of steering a new batch of Marvel films in the right direction.
So it's interesting that when Marvel Studios formed in 2007, then Kevin Feige and Avi Arad disagreed on what direction to take, which resulted in Arad eventually leaving the company while Feige stayed on and steered the whole ship. Many others were of course instrumental in Marvel Studios too, but Feige has been the public face of it and the key assembling force. Now, the first news cycle obviously belonged to Feige. The Hollywood Reporter clearly have sources at Marvel Studios since they hammer on about how Feige proved himself and that this restructuring and his promotion was only natural. But then you have Ike Perlmutter. What do we know about him?
Ike Perlmutter is an interesting man, probably worthy of his own Marvel-style Origins movie, a true rags to riches tale, probably more in the vein of the Kingpin than Spider-Man or anybody else. He was born in the then British Mandate of Palestine, now Israel. He immigrated to the United States after serving in the Israeli army during the Six-Day War of 1967. He arrived in New York City with $250 in his pocket. He earned a living leading services at funerals with tips. Eventually, he moved up to selling toys and beauty products on the streets. He never went to university, but he did develop a useful skill for reading balance sheets and spotting overlooked value in weak or distressed companies. Eventually, Toy Biz happened, a toy company he started that managed to purchase the licensing of many Marvel character action figures. Soon, Toy Biz was bought by Marvel, and he found himself on the board. During the Marvel bankruptcy, he ended up as the largest Marvel shareholder and CEO of the company. He's a strange, reclusive man who rarely leaves the house, and when he does, it only seems to be in disguise. You know what, we'll talk more about that in a second.
Still, let's give credit where credit is due, because he's a self-made billionaire who started from nothing, and whose business acumen and thriftiness has helped Marvel turn around after it was completely gutted and almost left for dead by Perelman back in the day. When Disney bought Marvel, they gave Marvel new offices on the Disney lot, but again here Perlmutter's thrift and strikes, because I didn't like these new offices because they were too posh, and he didn't want his people pampered, while he himself pocketed $1 billion from the merger. So he made sure Marvel staff kept their old run-down bankruptcy-furnished digs. Just last year, he finally agreed that they could move into the Disney lot, but he still wouldn't let them get rid of their very old, in poor shape couches.
Admittedly, we could probably spend the next hour on weird and wonderful Perlmutter stories, so let's do it. Famous for his scrimping and saving, it is alleged that Ike only wanted to serve potato chips at the Iron Man 1 premiere, and if that wasn't strange enough, he decided to attend the event in disguise as not to be recognised by the cast or crew. I had to find some images of this guy, who seems completely unreal, and there is only one photo of him that exists online from the 80s, looking like a character straight out of Mad Men. This guy really could be a Bond villain, and is as mysterious as Leonardo DiCaprio's character in The Great Gatsby. For such an influential businessman, he really knows how to keep a lid on things. Or so he thought.
Bleeding Cool must have sources at Marvel Entertainment, as the narrative from them doesn't line up with the narrative from the Hollywood Reporter, who seems to have sources with Feige's camp in Marvel Studios.
Bleeding Cool goes further in putting Feige in a negative light. So according to Bleeding Cool, the Marvel Creative Committee were heavily involved with the better received films, such as Iron Man 1, Guardians of the Galaxy, and The Winter Soldier, and the movies they had little involvement in were Iron Man 2, 3, and Age of Ultron.
Now, this makes no sense if we consider that they also claimed that Feige used the alleged failure of Age of Ultron as sort of a bargaining chip to change management. But why remove the management that had nothing to do with the failures? So that leaves the question, who is correct, the Hollywood Reporter or Bleeding Cool? What do you guys think?
I feel like the Hollywood Reporter is probably a little bit closer to the money, as they're covering the story that most other people seem to be agreeing with, but that's just my 2 cents.
As far as Bleeding Cool, I mean, the whole issue with me is that Perlmutter is such a reclusive guy, and it's so easy to blame him for all of these issues, and it's all, coming from secondhand sources. he really puts himself in a situation where, I mean, if he doesn't say anything, you have to expect that people are going to come at him.
My take on it is that the truth is somewhere in between, probably. I trust the Hollywood Reporter more in terms of the influence of the Marvel Creative Committee, simply because that lines up more with the facts that we see, and that's consistent with the overall narrative, whereas what Bleeding Cool is trying to say is just inconsistent with everything else, even with what they're saying themselves. Beyond that, I think the truth is somewhere in between. That, yeah, Kevin Feige, he's the man in charge, and maybe he does have a tendency to isolate himself. We certainly can't rule that out. However, you can't argue with the results that he has delivered. Of course, there are some implications from this, and the most important one, I think, first and foremost, is that Kevin Feige won't quit, because he's not fixed at Marvel for the indefinite future. He has a contract, and it's going to expire, and they really need to renew that, and this new structure might go a long way in assuring that that's going to happen. What do you think about that?
You'd have to imagine that Warner Brothers would want this guy so desperately and would pay him anything. I mean, his films just make money. It's just insane. So if you've ever heard Kevin Feige talk about these films, he's so passionate about it, and you would hope at this point, with the amount that he would have already gotten paid, that he's there for life. But unfortunately, that's not really how the business works.
Well, hopefully he's there, because as you said before, he started as the guy they went to because he loved comics. He's the guy that knew about all the origins and all the characters when everyone was sort of just there to make the movies. And I think this love for Marvel will carry him on and keep him there, hopefully. And they seem to have gone through some great lengths to keep him happy. They're isolated on Feige Island, allegedly.
But still, he's not completely isolated. Like, this isn't a George Lucas situation where he can completely dictate anything how he wants it. He still answers to Alan Horn, but he will have some more financial freedom, presumably. Bleeding Cool, now, who are deeply in the Perlmutter camp, reported that the two Infinity Wars movies will cost a combined $1 billion. Now, of course, keep in mind, this comes from the Perlmutter camp, and maybe they just want to bring the narrative that, oh, look at this guy now, he's gone completely nuts and he wants to spend all of this money on these movies, so they're going to be huge disasters no matter what happens. Do you believe that? Do you think that Kevin Feige, running Marvel Studios on his own, is really going to spend $1 billion on the two Infinity Wars movies?
What do you think? Is he out of control? Has Kevin Feige lost his mind?
I think at this point, it probably costs about $1 billion for Marvel to hire Robert Downey Jr. to play Iron Man. So it's probably 10% of that budget will actually go to anything else besides Robert Downey Jr.'s salary.
Well, you split up Infinity Wars, it's two movies. That's if Iron Man makes it to Infinity Wars at the same time.
I think the biggest issue in here is that the guy, this Perlmutter character, he's fantastic at building businesses up from nothing. He's able to invest in the right places. The issue with him is he doesn't know what to do when he has the money, when they're on top. He's still running a company like they've just begun, or they're trying to come back from something.
That's why he's so reliable, apparently, is because he just won't spend money. He just kind of keeps it and hoards it for himself and won't let anybody buy new couches. God knows what would happen if they had a new couch.
That's a really important thing, though, because you see that in many very different areas of business. You need one kind of person to build the company from scratch, because that takes a particular kind of ingenuity. But once the company is built, then very often you're going to need someone else to run it while things are established. So that could be a good point. Maybe Perlmutter was vital to bringing Marvel back up from the ashes, but maybe Feige is better at running it now when things are fine.
I think that the tricky thing for me is that despite all of these crazy statements about both of the characters really from different sides, it's worked. And we've had fantastic films over the last 5 or 6 years that can really just speak for themselves. So my concern is that even if both of these people hate each other, somehow they've been able to create this art that really speaks to so many people. And I'm very concerned personally about mixing that up too much.
I'm kind of on the other side of the fence. Like I know Perlmutter, he's kept the business afloat and sort of saved them from bankruptcy, all that stuff. But just the fact that allegedly, anyway, he was trying to keep Iron Man out of Civil War movie was just to me. I'm a big fan of Marvel. I love Civil War, and I don't know how to tell that story in a really great, spectacular way without having Captain America and Iron Man. And also, that was something that they've been trying to build up since Age of Ultron, most recently since the original Avengers movie. They were lining up to tell that story where Captain America and Iron Man clash, and Perlmutter wasn't going to let them do it. I don't think that his mind is as clearly on the craft and the stories and the art and the heart that Kevin Feige. I feel like Kevin Feige just has a lot more heart. That's me.
Then there is the importance of the Marvel Creative Committee, because now that they have been removed from the picture, at least from the Marvel Studio side of things, creative decisions are now being made by Kevin Feige, Louis Deposito, and Victoria Alonso. Any thoughts on this matter?
This is where I'm not that happy, just because the Marvel Creative Committee has got Brian Michael Bendis and Joe Quesada, who, when I was first getting into comics, this is just a bit of a nostalgic little thing for me. Brian Michael Bendis' run on Ultimate Spider-Man was something that really hooked me into the Marvel Universe and made me really appreciate and like comics as this continuous soap opera. And he ran that comic for such a long time. And his run on Daredevil, I thought, was just something that made me really interested in comic books, and that he's no longer giving any input into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, where, according to Bleeding Cool, they were influential in making Guardians of the Galaxy and Winter Soldier and some of the best Marvel films. That sort of makes me a little bit upset.
It's interesting, though, that according to the Hollywood Reporter, the Marvel Creative Committee really only gave like a stupid save the cat kind of instructions. Like, oh, the hero must save someone here and there, and basically just really, really basic, safe, by the number stuff. So it took the people now running the show to do things a little bit more edgy. So here you have like this difference in narrative. Who do you believe?
To me, just knowing Brian Michael Bendis' previous work and some of his original work when he was doing independent comics like AKA Goldfish is a really, really great con man comic book, he wouldn't be a person to give out save the cat advice. And also Joe Quesada, I kind of felt he did a lot of really dark, gritty books. I read a few of his Daredevil stories, and when I was first getting into comic books, they didn't feel like people who would give that sort of really basic paint-by-numbers comic book advice. I haven't read them quite recently, so I don't really know if that's really changed, but that just to me doesn't ring true.
And then, of course, there is the matter of the continuity between Marvel on film and Marvel on TV. Some have claimed that there will be a greater separation between the two. Now, of course, Kevin Feige has recently come out and said that it's probably just a matter of time before we'll see the Netflix heroes in the cinematic Marvel universe, but the problem is coordination, since the movies take so much longer prep time, whereas the TV series have a shorter turnaround time. But then there is the matter of the Inhumans, which have figured heavily in the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and to have their own movie lined up for a 2019 release, who Bleeding Cool suggested might be cancelled because of Feige's promotion. What do you think about that?
Well, to me, this is just a personal thing again. I find that the Marvel TV shows are very swing and miss, a lot of them. I don't like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. particularly, but I like Agent Carter. I like Daredevil. And I don't think it's a particularly important thing to me, at the very least, that they cross over into these films, because they just seem to fit into such different worlds. But that being said, I know a lot of people are really looking forward to the Inhumans and for Daredevil to show up in Spider-Man or whatever. And Luke Cage and the Defenders to maybe make an appearance in Infinity Wars. But as for the Inhumans movie being scrapped, and I feel like that's such a silly move on everybody's account, and it just wouldn't be a thing that they would let happen, the two big markets, and it would be just smarter for them to keep them as connected as possible.
I also don't think that the Inhumans movie is going to be cancelled, because also that scoop from Bleeding Cool has been debunked up and down by Hitfix and Birth Movies, Death, and pretty much everyone else. Of course, debunkings come cheap. We won't know what actually happens before cameras roll, but I think it's more likely that the Inhumans might be pushed back a year rather than it being cancelled. And there will still be continuity between film and TV. Kevin Feige himself has stated that these are inevitable but challenging due to schedule. However, the movies are more likely to cross over with Netflix than with the network shows like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. And there will still be continuity because it now is the responsibility of publisher Dan Buckley and Chief Creative Officer Joe Quesada, among others, who will remain on the committee for continuity purposes, as some coordination and cooperation is required to make the movies and the TV and everything else line up. Of course, this now brings us to the really interesting topic for conversation, namely the relationship between Fox and Marvel and any potential rights reversal. Feige now has greater power and he has ties with Fox, and with Feige's greater power comes Perlmutter's diminished power, and maybe this could be a good thing.
Well, Perlmutter's relationship with Fox has been pretty fragile. As we've discussed, he has a tendency to let his emotions take over, and there was the story last year of Perlmutter refusing to let anybody put up Fantastic Four posters in or around the Marvel offices.
And we've also got to remember that Perlmutter was the guy who didn't really want into the Spider-Man deal. Now that he's gone, Feige has a lot of friends over at Fox. It's where he started. We can start tearing down these walls and maybe get some more things moving. We know that Fox wants to do an X-Men TV show, and we need Marvel to okay that as soon as August.
Marvel has recently backtracked on some of their lockout decisions with Fox, particularly in regards to the character of Deadpool. The Deadpool game license at Activision has been renewed, and they're actually talking about bringing it to PlayStation 4 and Xbox consoles.
What might also improve the relationship is if Fox are willing to put the Fantastic Four movie rights on the table, and that movie flopping worse than the worst nightmare any Fox exec probably has ever had certainly helps that happening. There is also the matter of Fox wanting to do an X-Men TV show, which they were talking about as early as August, and they need Marvel to sign off on that. Now here we have some way that the two can come to the table and start talking. And some talking must have happened because on October 14th, the two X-Men spin-off TV series, Hellfire and Legion, were announced. Now this of course was followed by speculation that Marvel had already regained the Fantastic Four movie rights. Of course, both Marvel and Fox denied the hell out of this really shortly afterwards and stated that the rights still remain with Fox. What do you think about this? Do you think that this was just some denial and the rights have reverted, or do they still remain with Fox?
Look, for me, as just like a casual fan of a lot of these films, I think people tend to forget that if Fox makes a great Fantastic Four movie, people will go and watch other Marvel films. I don't think anybody benefits if either of the studio loses money like the last Fantastic Four film did. Whether the rights are with Fox or Marvel, we won't know. But if they are still with Fox, I do have hope that they could somehow reboot this thing with some help from Marvel and create something that's, it wouldn't be hard to make something in the last Fantastic Four film.
I think now that the bad blood between Perlmutter and Fox has sort of subsided, is sort of out of the picture a little bit, we can really, it like you said, Chris, it's in everyone's benefit to keep making these really good movies. And Spider-Man, his films have been some of the highest grossing, highest budget movies that have, superhero movies. That was it before these Marvel Cinematic Universe sort of came along. And for them to give that over to Marvel and let them use that is that's a huge step. So I think in the next few years, we're definitely going to be seeing a lot more cooperation between Fox and Marvel because it's in everybody's best interest. Everybody except Perlmutter, apparently.
This denial reminds me a lot about the whole Sony situation. Because remember, just a few days before the deal was announced, there was rampant speculation because of the Sony hack, so everyone knew there had been talks and people were speculating and more or less talking as if the rights were already back until Sony issued a press release denying everything. The rights were with them and that's how it was going to be, period. And then just a few days later they announced that the rights were indeed shared between Marvel and Sony. Now I think the denial itself might be similar here. I think there's definitely more to it, but they're not yet ready to announce anything. I think that technically the rights still belong with Fox and they're going to do for some time, because right now Fox handing the rights back would be admitting defeat and they're not going to do that, at least not until the movie is out on DVD and Blu-ray and TV rights have been sold, because now they just want to recapitalize as much from that humiliating loss as they possibly can. And then when more time has passed after the DVD and Blu-ray is out, sometime in maybe 2016, I would put money on that we'll learn that the Fantastic Four movie rights have indeed returned to Marvel. But I wouldn't put much money on it.
I think, unfortunately, it's not just that people didn't go and see the film, it's that the film was that bad that everybody who did go and see it and spend their money are going to be really bitter about it. And I think in order to bring Fantastic Four back from this, it's going to take a huge redevelopment of the characters, the situations, the script, the people involved, the style. Everything has to change because for a lot of people, they don't care whether Fox or Marvel has it. They just care about having a good, entertaining story. I think giving it to Marvel is obviously what the fans want. But to be completely honest, I think the value of Fantastic Four has plummeted so much in the last decade.
I don't think they can be resuscitated at Fox. It's just no way. This team of the Fantastic Four is dead. But beyond that, the Fantastic Four has never had a beloved movie. Like there's no popular movie to fall back on. It's just like one bad movie after the other. And they come at it from a really horrible perspective. It's not like any new movie doesn't have to like build the brand from scratch. It has to wash away the stain of bad movies in the past. And I think the only ones who have a shot at doing that are Marvel, and even they probably can't do it in a standalone movie. I think they'd have to introduce the characters somewhere else before they make a standalone movie, just to wash away the stench.
I agree. Also, I think you need to build people's trust back at this point.
Yeah.
And unfortunately for Marvel at this stage, they're expecting to be putting so many heroes in each of their films at this point that there isn't going to be much room for reintroducing the Fantastic Four.
And again, that isn't really all that important. What is much more urgent for them are the characters that come associated with the Fantastic Four movie rights, like the Silver Surfer and Galactus. Those are the ones they really want. But also some other races, like for instance the Badoon. All of these are characters and people that Marvel really, really want and need in their cosmic side of things. So they're going to want the Fantastic Four movie rights back just for those, even if the Fantastic Four themselves might have to wait a while longer before they are seen on film again.
I completely agree, and I also think that part of the problem with the Fantastic Four films is that, sort of similar to Man of Steel and Superman, they're a team of superheroes that have kind of dated in the way their stories have told. Their origin stories isn't particularly that interesting, and I always found when I was reading the comic books that they did exist, like they had much better stories when they were set aside the Hulk or set aside any of the other Marvel characters. I think that's where they perform their best in narrative.
So anyway, we won't know for some time what is up with the Fantastic Four rights. To sum it up, this restructuring could mean bigger movie budgets. It could mean fewer tie-ins with at least the network side of the TV. It could mean greater autonomy. It could mean less reliance on the underlying source material. We just won't know, not for some time, whether this shakeup is good or bad, or the fate of the Fantastic Four movie rights.
If you liked this video, don't forget to hit subscribe so you can catch all of our upcoming videos. For more podcasts, news, and reviews, check us out at midnightsedge.net and follow us on Twitter at midnightsedge. Also check out our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/midnightsedge.